of Nyanza region, which includes a visit to Bondo in Siaya County.
And across the borders, about 1,000 people have been confirmed dead in Israel and Palestine after a massive coordinated assault by Hamas militants that started early Saturday.
Yes, not very good news coming from Israel, but in Kenya, we are celebrating. Congratulations, Kelvin Kiptum, for making us proud. Kelvin Kiptum celebrating after winning the 2023 Bank of America Chicago Marathon in Chicago, Illinois yesterday. And they lowered the previous record of compatriot Eliud Kipchoge by more than 30 seconds. Definitely, congratulations. Over now to the top story. Now, President William Ruto will this morning chair cabinet meeting at the Kisumu State Lodge as he concludes his 4-day working tour of the region. Today's cabinet meeting will be the very first since last week's cabinet reshuffle that saw a number of CSs and state departments moved to new dockets in a bid to improve efficiency. The meeting will be preceded by the signing of the privatization bill. The president will later head to the Kisumu shipyard in Kisumu Central, where he is expected to commission the MV Uhuru 2 vessel. He will later travel to Siaya County, where he will preside over the launch of the construction of the Bondo-Liunda Road. Ruto's tour of the Nyanza region has taken him to the 4 counties of Homa Bay, Migori, Kisumu, and Siaya. Let's now get the day's diary before we take a look at the dailies.
Well, and on today's diary, we start on a very happy note where Kelvin Kiptum has broken the world record to win the Chicago Marathon in 2 hours and 35 seconds. The 23-year-old has broken Eliud Kipchoge's world record of 2 hours, 1 minute and 9 seconds set as at the 2022 Berlin Marathon a few weeks ago. And away from that, preparations for Utamaduni Day are in the home stretch, even as confusion lingers about the holiday, which was initially called Huduma Day and at some point even Moi Day. However, the CEO for Bomas of Kenya will be speaking more on that while setting the record concerning the day later tonight at 9 p.m. on TV47 Daily Report with George Maringa. So do stand by for that. And the unrest in Israel continues as hundreds of people have died following the Hamas surprise attack on Israel on Saturday. The attack by hundreds of gunmen from Hamas under the cover of intense rocket fire has reportedly killed at least 600 people in Israel so far. And President William Ruto's tour of the Nyanza region comes to an end as is expected to assent the privatization bill in Kisumu State Lodge and later on chair a cabinet meeting at Kisumu State Lodge and later commissioning of the MV Uhuru at the Kisumu shipyard, Kisumu Central constituency, and later on launch the construction of the Bondo-Liunda Road in Bondo constituency. And away from that, today in history, on this day, the first Afghan elections were held, and on this day in 2004, for the first time in Afghanistan's history, voters went to the polls to choose a president, selecting Hamid Karzai, who had served as the interim president after the fall of the Taliban regime in 2001. And that's what we have on our diary this morning. Let's now have a look at the dailies.
We kick off with the Standard this morning. On the Standard, the big headline there: broke millionaires. Tender gamble, doing business with government can be lucrative, but in some occasions the money has always been on paper. With pending bills running into hundreds of billions, government suppliers are regretting their business decisions to wade into the tender business. The story is on page 4. And a quote here by Rina Nano, who won an NYS tender, he says, At the moment, I don't even know my fate. I am now waiting for the creditors to come and take the remaining things that I have. Someone else, Simon Gishuki, Secretary General of the Association of Public Suppliers, says, if a new governor comes into office today, forget that money. We have suffered the most because of a regime change, and you are reduced to nothing. Sad news there. That's a big headline. The other big headline, of course, simply the best. Kiptum, new marathon record holder. And a very nice picture of Kelvin Kiptum, who won the Chicago Marathon yesterday, beating the world record set by compatriot Eliud Kipchoge with a time of 2 hours, 35 seconds. Other stories highlighted on the front page. Will Ruto excel in Nyanza, where many have failed? The question is asked on page 10. And elsewhere, Israel faces a long, difficult war with Hamas on the international pages 22. On the top strip of the Standard this morning, how hysteria manifests in adolescents. Stories on page 16. On the health and science pullout, when mental illness knocks on your door. Remember, we also do have a discussion this morning linked to mental illness as well, ahead of the World Mental Health Day tomorrow. And another interesting story on page 23, why Lokasa Mbongo cannot rest in peace. That's the front page of the Standard. The back page of the Standard is left for village boy Kiptum, wiping away Kipchoge's world marathon record in enviable fashion. The entire back page is dedicated to Kelvin Kiptum after his heroics in Chicago yesterday. And that's the Standard this morning.
There's one page that you forgot to take a look at, page 29. This morning, I'll give it for you so that we can have a rest this week. I know our director, Kevo, ataki kukumbuka Liverpool walitoka draw. But yeah, that's...
Can you get a clap for Arsenal?
For the next 5 seconds, have your...
I know it's because Man United also got to win, but I think our win was bigger. The Arsenal win was definitely
bigger.
Bigger.
Because when playing with City, you always, it's always, there's tension, eh? It's a gamble. You're like, oh, City.
And now that you've started that story, now you know it is important that you get used to watching big teams play. This is how big teams handle.
How real
your 5 seconds are over. Your 5 seconds of shine are over.
Not beating, was it Brighton or?
Let's focus on the Daily Nation this morning. So Daily Nation goes with this question. Falling apart in matters politics, so Kenya Kwanza leaders appear to be reading from different scripts. Ruto and Gachagua in a back and forth over quote-unquote shareholding. So have the photos there of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua and the President, William Ruto, each holding microphones. President Ruto saying it is primitive and backward for anybody to imagine that any region of Kenya cannot get development on account of how they voted. That is not correct. While DP Gachagua says those who joined us late should not expect much at the expense of Kenya Kwanza loyalists, we will continue giving good jobs to those who stood with us from the beginning. And more on this is on page 7, and you will read that while President Ruto has maintained that his administration will not discriminate against any part of the country because of political differences, DP Gachagua has been unapologetic that the interests of those who voted for the ruling alliance come first. Other stories making it to the Daily Nation, why scholars were locked out of top law council job. Former Council of Legal Education Board Chairman Githu Muigai says they did not meet minimum requirements. And still in matters politics, Ruto seeks to end Raila's stranglehold on Nyanza. President William Ruto's 4-day Nyanza tour that ends today marks the most rigorous exercise in ODM leader Raila Odinga's backyard, with the head of state looking to end the opposition leader's 18-year dominance of the region. That is on page 7. On the right side of Daily Nation, just below there, conflict. Hundreds killed and thousands injured in fighting between Israel and Palestine. Some international news on page 18. And on the top strip of Daily Nation, inside governors fight for road billions. They quote some numbers there, 84.5 billion Kenyan shillings. This is what Kenya Roads Board collected from fuel levy in 2020 and 2021. So in page 10, you will read that the fight for control over nearly 100 billion shillings collected by the Kenya Roads Board, KRB, from the fuel levy annually has emerged as the new battlefront between governors and the national government that has threatened to spill the courts. 20% as MLF for counties to be increased to 20% in the 2024-2025 financial year. And books realization there, Chisoni's death in the battle to save my career. That is former president's private doctor. And finally, Matters Sports, one of our top highlights. And makofi kwake for Kiptum's road to greatness. Kenya's Kevin Kiptum celebrates after winning the 2023 Bank of America Chicago Marathon in Chicago, Illinois yesterday in a world record time of 2 hours and 35 seconds, lowering the previous record of 2 hours, 1 minute and 9 seconds held by compatriot Eliud Kipchoge. And finally, on, well, actually the back page today reflects on that particular marathon. We have all that particular story. Record-breaking Kiptum takes major stride towards marathon greatness.
Amazing.
It
looks like it's the start of a new era when it comes to marathon in Kenya.
Oh, yes. I love the fact that every single week when you're starting on a Monday, we always clap for athletes, mostly, you know, clapping for athletes and
Arsenal.
And Arsenal,
yeah. But it's okay. Yeah, you were saying.
The business.
Our politicians, I feel like our politicians, I should do better so that we clap for them next time. Oh, there's this person who's done this thing in their county. Yeah?
Oh, yes.
Should be a wake-up call for them. Tuangazie gazeti la Taifa Leo asubuhi ya leo, na taarifa kuu pale ni kuna kitu kipya hapa. Ishara za urafiki baina ya Ruto na Raila, Kalonzo zazua gumzo kuu, na wasingeona uso kwa macho baada ya uchaguzi mkuu uliosababisha maandamano makali, ila kwa sasa viongozi hao wa Azimio wameanza kumchangamkia Rais Ruto huku wakimponda Gachagua. Je, kunani? Habari hiyo katika ukurasa wa pili wa gazeti la Taifa Leo asubuhi hii. Na vile taarifa nyingine katika gazeti ya Taifa Leo pale juu kabisa kuna Gachagua kunja mkia, agutusha wengi kwa kutaka urafiki na uhuru, huku Ruto akianza kumponda. Na naona taarifa kuu pale, Arsenal ya piku Man City EPL, majabali hao wapita mabingwa watetezi Liverpool wala sare. Hiyo habari iko katika ukurasa wa 20 wa Taifa Leo asubuhi hii. Na vile rekodi mpya ya dunia hapo hivyo Kelvin Kiptum asherehekea ubingwa wa mbio za Chicago Marathon jijini Chicago, Illinois, Amerika jana. Kiptum alifuta rekodi ya Eliud Kipchoge kwa kumaliza mbio hizo kwa saa 2 na 35 seconds. Kevin Kiptum pictured there. Na vile katika gazeti la Taifa Leo habari nyingine pale, Wajakoya msifu Ruto. Mwaniaji huyo wa urais wa mwaka 2022 aliyemiminia sifa rais alipohutubu katika tamasha ya watanashati huko Meru. Na katika masuala ya masomo, wanavyuo wakataa ufadhili, hofu ya zuka baada ya wanafunzi 26,000 kutoomba mikopo na ufadhili. Hizo ndizo taarifa kuu katika gazeti la Taifa Leo asubuhi.
Okay, let's move on to the People Daily. This morning on the People Daily, the big headline, height emission, tough rules for GSU candidates, how to qualify. Signal to regional police bosses outlines qualifications that officers must meet before they can be considered, but IPOA says it is in the dark on their welfare. The story is on page 4. It's a big headline on that on the front page of the People Daily. Of course, Kelvin Kiptum also makes it to the front page of the People Daily. Kiptum sets a marathon record. It's also on the back page, and the time of 2 hours and 35 seconds beamed on the front page of the People Daily today. Other news making it to the front page of the People Daily. What's happening in Israel? Israel Prime Minister warns Palestine after attack kills 200. The death toll, of course, in both sides, Palestine and Israel. The Gaza has already surpassed 1,000. Elsewhere, economy grows by 5.4% in Q2. Expansion surpassed the 5.2% recorded last year due to improved output in agriculture. That's a business highlight on the front page of the People Daily. Now, on the very top strip of the paper, lack of data hurts campaign against mental illnesses. The story is on page 2, and it is part of this coverage of the World Mental Health Day to be marked tomorrow. Lack of data hurts campaign against mental illness. And it ties to our question of the day. Do you believe that mental health issues are becoming a growing concern in Kenya? Continue interacting with us on our social media pages, TV47 News on X and TV47 Kenya on Facebook. And that's People Daily today.
And from PD to BD, Business Daily on the front page. Kenya to compel foreigners to buy local health cover. There is a big story. They continue to say that plan will hand local insurers a major windfall, and also new fund to replace NHIF to be one of the biggest winners. On the bottom strip there of still on Business Daily, Safaricom halves suppliers spending breaches 100 billion Kenyan shillings. And on the right side, the ticker there, Kenyan imports from Russia, Ukraine hit 51 billion Kenyan shillings. More on this, you'll get on the economy, matters economy on page 4. More on this is that expenditure on imports from Russia and Ukraine climbed nearly fourfold in the first half of the year. Official data showed on Thursday, driven largely by increased orders of wheat and maize grains. And matters companies, Telkom Kenya loses 1.6 million customers. So Telkom Kenya, the third biggest telco in the country, lost 1.62 million subscribers between March last year and June this year amid the latest crackdown on irregularly registered SIM cards. An analysis of official data shows that the telco had 2.25 million active subscribers as at June, a 39% dip from 4.14 million subscribers in March last year. And in matters money, pension fund assets up 127 billion shillings on NSSF new rates. So pension fund assets rose by 127 billion shillings in the first half of this year, boosted in part by the introduction of higher mandatory contributions to the NSSF and exchange gains on offshore investments. On the top strip there, as we wrap up on Business Daily, a quote there, an op-ed, the Labour Migration Management Bill 2023 is a pretty decent attempt to bring order to Kenyan migration. That is according to Carol Musyoka. This is Matters Intelligence on page 9. And finally, the pull-out there on Matters Life, planning to get married? First, take these tests. That is on page 19. Right, that is on Business Daily.
Well, let's have a look at the Star this morning. And the headline there, Ruto succession battle threatens unity in the rift. And at the center of the struggle, fight for the president here for the 2032 general polls continues. Supremacy was possible. Successors include CS Murkomen and Senator Aaron Cheruiyot. And away from that, Kiptum smashes Eliud's world record. Also on this term, KWS team to lead heavy lifting as they load buffalo into a truck. There is a picture there of showing the Kenya Wildlife officers there loading buffalo into a truck. And also on the Star this morning, Ruto fires warning shot at cartels as he moves to save sugar industry. This is during his Nyanza tour. And away from that, Nguvio secondary students celebrate headmistress 47 years after leaving the school. And finally, hundreds of senior police officers moved as new transfer policy takes effect. That's what we have on the Star this morning.
And even as we transition to the regional news, let's take a look at the East African today. And on the East African, the big headline, AFCON in EA, no room for games. The Pamoja bid by Tanzania, Kenya and Uganda wagers at least $200 million on the tournament. But smart play could see it change East Africa for good. The story is extensively covered on pages 4 to 6 of the East African this morning. Other stories highlighted on the East African on the top strip. 4 parties back Kagame's bid. Smaller parties in coalition with ruling Rwandan Patriotic Front say he is the best for the nation's unity and growth. Elsewhere, Tanzania seeks $1.8 billion for SGR. Turkish contractor Yapi Merkezi has reported funding gap as it continues to facilitate Dodoma's search for cash. Other little highlights there. Haiti mission may face a funding hitch. And a flash with cash, SMEs, a good sign. That's just some of the highlights on the front page of the East African this morning. Right,
tuvuke boda tuende Kampala, the front page of the Daily Monitor. And our First Lady, Rachel Ruto, is on the front page of what is happening in Uganda, her trip there. I'm curious if the whole cutting of the delegation was implemented as of this trip. Anyway, Rwanda asks Uganda to arrest Chinese investor. So send him to us. Chinese businessman Chen Chao, 38, is wanted in Kigali on forgery and tax evasion charges, according to an international warrant of arrest on September 22nd by the head of Rwanda's National Prosecution Authority. And below there, they have a photo of President Museveni, Yoweri Museveni, First Lady and Minister of Education Janet Museveni, and Kenya's First Lady Rachel Ruto for the national prayer breakfast that happened yesterday. I think this is ahead of the 61 years of independence, and they actually have it on the top strip of Daily Monitor. 61 years of independence supplement. So Uganda will today mark 61 years since attaining independence from Britain. In this commemorative edition, we look at the journey so far, the infrastructural changes, political roller coaster, and the economic outlook, among others. 50-page coverage. And well, most of that particular coverage will really focus on Museveni as the president in all this matters, political roller coaster and even infrastructure, because he has been quite a huge chunk of this particular 61 years of the independence.
Yes, from 1986 to now, that's how many years?
Close to 40.
Yeah?
Yeah, 20, 40, yeah, more than 45.
Actually 37, heading to 38 years.
Yes.
Basically, yeah. 3/4 of...
yes. A good 2/3, almost 2/3 of that 61 years, he's been the president.
Right. And other stories making it to the Daily Monitor matters the healthy living, why cancer cases in adults under 50 are on the rise. This coming as October marking Cancer Awareness Month. And other stories on Daily Monitor. The whole international beat, death toll from Israel-Palestine, war hits over 1,000. That's what is happening in Kampala.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and moving on to Tanzania, on the Citizen this morning, why top Indian university will award Samia honorary PhD. Remember, Samia Suluhu was on a trip to India over this last week, and India's Jawaharlal Nehru University will tomorrow confer an honorary doctorate on President Samia Suluhu Hassan in recognition of her achievements in diplomacy and accelerating people-centered development in Tanzania, among other successes. And also headlining the Citizen in Tanzania this morning, government now putting more emphasis on geophysical research, and Tanzania can become a farming powerhouse, says envoy. The important role of centers handling criminal lunatics. Away from that, on the very top strip of the Citizen this morning is your health headache, the challenges that come with medicine peddlers. And also headlining there is Nicole, investors set for 2.6 billion shillings a dividend this year. And Matters international, Israel battles Hamas and premier warns of long, difficult war. That's what's headlining on the Citizen this morning.
Tuangazie gazeti la Mwananchi kule Tanzania. Habari kuu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi: majanga kwa shule bila uzio, zatajwa kuwa ni mwingiliano wa jamii, kukosa utulivu, wadau wadai baadhi hutumika kama njia za bodaboda na matendo machafu. Serikali yaeleza hali iliyopo, hatua zinazochukuliwa. Majanga kwa shule bila uzio. I think they're talking about schools without fences in Tanzania. Kwingineko, habari nyingine iliyopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi kule Tanzania: mapigano ya pamba moto Israel, Hamas ni kupige kati ya kundi la Hamas linalotawala ukanda wa Gaza likiungwa mkono na kundi la Hezbollah la Lebanon wakipigana na Israel. Vidokezo vingine kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi: Mavundo aweka wazi mikakati kuikwamua sekta ya madini. Kwingineko, Julius Nyerere alivyomvuta Daktari Salim kwenye siasa. Pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi: Rais Samia kutunukiwa shahada nyingine ya heshima nchini India. Mambo ya ushirikiano pale. Na hizi ndizo habari zinazopewa kipaumbele kule Tanzania Jumatatu hii ya leo kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa gazeti la Mwananchi.
Right, even as we now focus on masuala ya caricature, this particular week setting the whole stage for the cartoons this morning. Page 13 of the Daily Nation, talking about matters deaths, and on page 12, matters international news. Beginning with the page 13 of the Daily Nation, the hand there, the gentleman, you can't really see his face, but we can definitely tell he is from China, basing on the flag there of the four small stars, four small yellow stars and big star, and while dropping some cash. And there's a gentleman there wearing a blue suit and a yellow tie. You can guess which probably leader or gentleman that is for you. He's holding a bowl or whatever that is, but then it has a hole in it. So the Chinese gentleman dropping some money, but then this particular money is going to the debts, really speaking largely on Chinese and African loans that are really there, that do accumulate for a number of years. It is on page 13 of Daily Nation.
The cartoon on the Standard today talks about what's happening in Israel and the cycle of violence, where they're just going round and round. You kill, I kill, you kill, I kill. And everyone has a gun pointed behind them. So you shoot one in front of you and you're shot by the one behind you. That's what is happening between Israel and Hamas. And it has been happening for years on end. And it is one of the biggest stories. I think it's featured on all the front pages of our dailies this morning.
I'm actually taking a look at a news update. This is according to the UN. So far, 123,538 Palestinians have been displaced. That is according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in its latest update. It also goes on to say that a total 159 housing units have been destroyed, while 1,210 have suffered severe damage.
Okay. Well, that's all in the dailies today. Remember that interesting conversation on Wellness Monday, lost state of mind, matters to do with mental wellness and a very unique way of how to handle mental health, coming up at 8 a.m. this morning. Do stand by for that. Before that, we'll be looking at the state of the nation with Frederick Okango, Political Affairs Secretary, KANU, Ren Martin, politician and political analyst, and Javas Bigambo, policy and political analyst, right here on State of the Nation. You're watching Morning Cafe. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Indemuli. It's time for us to get into that conversation about the state of the nation. And in studio with us this morning, we have Frederick Okango, Political Affairs Secretary of KANU. Good morning, Bwana Okango. Karibu sana.
Good morning, Fred.
We're still hoping that Ren Martin and Javas Bigambo will be joining this panel as we go on. But Okango, quite a lot of things to talk about, especially coming from that very busy weekend. But even before that, probably you'd want to take some time to congratulate Kelvin Kiptum for his heroics in Chicago. Sure. He's on the front page of all our dailies this morning. He set a new marathon world record of 2 hours 35 seconds, beating that record by a compatriot Eliud Kipchoge, who had done it in 2 hours, 1 minute, and I think 9 seconds. Yes. So let's take a look at the big stories coming from the weekend. Cracks in Kenya Kwanza, Gachagwa's Uhuru turnaround, issues around the bipartisan talk, and even, as the Star has it on the headline this morning, Ruto's succession. But let's start off with the bipartisan talks, because I know this is something that's very close to your heart as well. And I'm basing this from an opinion from the Weekend Standard on Sunday by Kamodho Waiganjo. And he says that we need to step up political and social manners first before amending the law. We've seen the way members of that National Dialogue Committee have been conducting the discussions. I think one of the most notable things was that squabble between Kalonzo Musyoka and Hassan Omar. And that in itself gave the feeling that if at all this can happen in front of cameras, then a lot more could be happening behind the scenes. I know you know a lot of things that are happening at Bomas. What is the state of affairs right now that the committee has retreated?
Actually, the committee has not retreated. First of all, thank you, Fred, for inviting me. On the issues of National Dialogue Committee, as you're aware, let me just take you back slightly. When the bipartisan talks collapsed, they collapsed because one side, which was Kenya Kwanza side, were not ready at that time. They were not committed, they were not dedicated to the talks, and therefore it collapsed. But to cut the story short, whatever happened, happened, and we came back, this time as National Dialogue Committee. Personally, I am part of the Azimio Technical Committee, and I support our team from the back end. And I want to say that if there is a discussion that has gotten the support of majority of Kenyans, that we have seen dedication from the negotiators, is the National Dialogue Committee. Mm-hmm. The National Dialogue Committee established a framework that was signed by both parties. In that framework, it provided for what we call participation of the people, the public participation. And therefore, it is on that basis that for the last 1 week, you saw different stakeholders coming with their views. Remember, the views that were presented by us, Azimio, were 5. Then those that were presented by Kenya Kwanza Alliance were also 5. These were harmonized into 5 issues, and one of them was outstanding constitutional issues, political party fidelity. Mm-hmm. There was establishment of offices, state offices, entrenchment of funds, and the likes. And therefore, today, those issues are no longer Kenya Kwanza or Azimio issues, but they are Kenyan issues. Now, in the framework, there is an opportunity for NADCO, as we call it, to facilitate participation of the people. Under the framework in clause 23 or the 25, it says that the NADCO shall facilitate public participation and also may consider views from the public. When these issues came up between His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka, our head of delegation, and Hassan Omar, one of the negotiators, I was in the room, I was there. And the issue is not about the concerns of the people. The issue is about the time allocation that were given to the people. You cannot stop the public from giving their views because you feel that the views they're giving are not necessarily, in line with what you think. And that is the essence of negotiation. You listen to everyone and you come to a table because the framework says they shall agree on consensus. What they don't agree on shall be tabled as contentious issues.
Okay.
Yes.
But it would appear that probably there is some sense around the concerns over the kind of time being given to people to present, various parties to present their views on this. And Kamodho Waiganjo feels the same, that this NADCO has gotten Kenyans excited, that the kind of proposals, far-reaching potential constitution change proposals, and he says it is impossible, according to him, for us to have a referendum at this time because, one, we do not have an IEBC in place. It is still subject to the same discussions, which would take time. The IEBC, once formed, already has a deadline for boundaries review, which they don't look likely to meet before the next elections. If at all we continue with discussions that could possibly lead to a plebiscite, do we really have time for that kind of undertaking?
I'll tell you. I know from which side Kamodho Waiganjo is speaking from, because I've been reading his articles, I've interacted with him. I know for sure he's reading from the other side. But that's not an issue. The amendment of a constitution, in fact, for us to go and amend this constitution, we must involve the people. If you remember the fate that befell BBI, the public participation is an aspect of constitutional amendment. Now, I know for sure we don't have IEBC. And to do all these things, first of all, boundary delimitation that is due next year, March, we must have IEBC in place. Not just an IEBC that replaces commissioners. No, we must have an IEBC that has got the trust of the people of Kenya. The one we had did not. And that's why for us as Azimio, we said, before we even go into the reconstitution and restructuring of IEBC, we must audit the 2022 elections and allow Kenyans to know the truth. Kenyans are owed the truth about that election. The truth that they are owed can only be seen or cannot be identified, cannot be established through an audit, independent audit, forensic and systems audit. That is what we are saying. That's our proposal. And we feel that way we shall be progressing towards restructuring and reconstitution. Number two, anyone who says, Fred, that, you cannot have a constitutional amendment, it is too late, those are naysayers. What we know, and that is the law, to amend this constitution, you only have two routes. The popular initiative, 257, that have participated from Punguza Mzigo all the way, BBI participated, or you go the parliamentary initiative. The issues that have been canvassed at Bomas, it's a mix. Some of them will be constitutional, some of them will be legislative, some of them will be policy, some of them will be administrative. But we know for sure, we are not amending this constitution for Raila Odinga, neither are we amending it for Ruto. No, we are amending this constitution for Kenyans. So whatever time it takes to amend does not matter. So what matters is those views must be considered. Remember, Fred, there were issues of concern to the people. And those issues, for example, I'll give you. People are saying, why should we now look at, why don't we now look at establishing office of the Prime Minister instead of having Prime Cabinet Secretary? What is Prime Cabinet Secretary? It's a mongrel. We have to go deep into the Constitution and establish an office that is recognized with two deputies. The others are saying, why don't we go and have, an office of the leader of official opposition? You cannot just wake up one day and establish it as such. You must go to the people, what is the views of the people, subject it to public participation, and get those views so that you amend.
Isn't it therefore correct to assume that the committee would be cognizant of the fact that they need to prioritize some of the issues, because some of these discussions, as you say, and you rightfully put it, could actually take a lot of time. Organizing a referendum needs time as well. But don't you think that priority should be on the reconstitution of the IEBC?
Before they started on invitation or inviting the public, the committee, the technical team, and the secretariat had prioritized. And the IEBC is one of the topmost agenda that must be considered first. That is a priority area. The other priority area is audit. The other priority area is cost of living, the issues that are affecting the people on a daily basis, including now as we speak. So that prioritization was done. Then there was what's called unbundling of the issues. The reason why I first started by telling you they have not retreated, people have not understood what's happening. Negotiations have not started. They have not. They are going to start after Tuesday. The reason, when the stakeholders were invited to come and give their views, it was part of the framework agreement that they will be facilitated and they should be involved. Now what has happened, it is the end of submitting the views or listening to the stakeholders. Those issues are numerous. They will be done in form of a report and unbundled so that they are categorized. The issues from stakeholders are these. This is where they fall. These are similar. These are different. Where do the two teams converge under issues submitted? Where don't they converge? And then these will be tabled at the NADCO in their meetings. So when they are tabled together with the other 5 issues that had been harmonized, there will be another harmonization of those stakeholder issues into constitutional, legislative, policy, and administrative if possible. And then now they reprioritize again. And I can tell you, I see where we have convergence as Azimio, the people of Kenya, and Kenya Kwanza is restructuring, reconstitution of IEBC. That will come first because we all need it. Political formations, both of them need it. The people of Kenya need it. That will happen. The other issue that we have pushed as Azimio is cost of living. Today, as we speak, Fred, you fuel at 211 Kenya shillings. The cost of basic commodities is still up because the fuel is up. You notice that life has become unbearable, and we must address it either as a what is called a substantive issue or as an interim measure. We must do that. So those are issues that we're going to do.
On that issue of the cost of living, because some of these are subject to budgetary and legislative processes. We already have a Finance Act. Are we looking at the possibility of pushing Kenya Kwanza to reverse what they've already put in law through the Finance Act?
If you listened to our submission when Azimio was submitting before the committee, and I was part of that team, we said that one of the proposals is we have to look at the overtaxation, the tax regime that Kenya Kwanza regime has come up with. It is punitive, reckless, and careless. Number 2, we must look at the subsidies on the interim. Are there ways that we can reintroduce subsidy to cushion Kenyans on the interim? Number 3, we must look at repealing sections or the entire Finance Act 2023 in total. So those are issues that we're considering. And that's what I'm saying. When we go into real negotiations, then we shall table our position papers that we shall make public to the media. Once we table them, they're ready. We shall make them public because that is the proposal we are giving. If we agree that for sure, because I can see Ruto and his team already have realized that it is difficult to lower the cost of living. They thought it's a walk in the park and it requires concerted effort. They said that they have a plan. They don't have a plan. They are planless. What we are saying is that we have to revisit. These are gentlemen and ladies who are now actually going back to Uhuru Kenyatta policies that they dismissed. So it means there's something maybe Uhuru Kenyatta was doing right that they can borrow from.
Okay.
Yes.
Back to the issue of the National Dialogue Committee, and one of the biggest concerns is actually the time factor. We are looking at more or less an obvious defiance of the Constitution, especially on the issue of boundaries review. The National Dialogue Committee must be cognizant of that fact, that because of the delays, part of which have been caused by this process at Bomas of Kenya, we will not be able to meet this constitutional deadline by March. There are consequences to that. Is the committee keen to address that issue? The fact that this process will go against the Constitution?
You know, if you read the framework agreement, it says that most urgent issues will be addressed within 30 days. They have been identified. Maybe they have not been addressed, but they have been identified, the most urgent. And one of them is cost of living and reconstitution and restructuring of IEBC. Then it says that this process must complete within 60 days. We are not yet there. We have a few days to go, around 20 something. And that will be done. And I can assure you that because the issues have been prioritized, the issue of boundary delimitation can only come in as something that can be done by IEBC as currently constituted. However, there are schools of thought that saying maybe we need to separate the aspect of delimitation and election management from IEBC. You know, so those are issues that people are toying around with. But I know for sure, even if we are to leave it as it is, as established in Article 89, still we are able to ensure that we meet the deadline of March 2024.
How IEBC itself has said in its presentation to the NADCO that it would need at least 18 months after the chairperson of the IEBC is in place. We still do not know where the chairperson
That is what they have said.
But 18 months to conduct this process, it means definitely this process will not meet that much deadline.
Are you aware that the same IEBC had started preparation on the same process way back? Are you aware about that? Are you aware that no one stops them from doing that as a secretariat, even in the absence of commissioners, to start preparing? And then when the commissioners come in, they go full into the action.
Are you saying that they're already undertaking
boundaries
delimitation?
No, they are not. But I'm saying nothing stops them from starting the preparation, even as they wait for the commissioners to come. Who are the commissioners? The commissioners, their job is to develop policies that are implemented by the secretariat. The secretariat is intact. Hussein Marjani is there. What are they doing? Are they waiting for somebody to come and sit on the chair and start preparing? They should be ready with everything that they need. Other than if it's a policy issue, then that's okay. But if the issues that are administrative, because largely some of those issues will be administrative, they should be. They're running the day-to-day activities.
The concern is that, and many people have said that we're looking at a possible constitutional crisis. I don't know if you agree.
I know that.
That, for example, there were constituencies that were considered protected. They did not meet the kind of
population quota, the threshold.
And that was only for the purposes of the first review, which was 12 years ago. Meaning by the time we get to the second review, which is in about 5 months or so, then they are no longer protected. There could be a risk that some of these constituencies may cease to exist. That's the risk I'm asking.
I know that. But the reason why we have a very progressive constitution as the people of Kenya is because such interpretations will be done by the court. Somebody will have to go to court and seek proper interpretation of the same, and the court will advise appropriately. So there's no worry. People should not be worried. You see, we had similar situations in terms of meeting the two-thirds gender. Remember, Justice Maraga gave an opinion that the parliament was supposed to be dissolved. Was it dissolved? Was it?
No, it wasn't.
So, I mean, all these issues, what is important, Fred, is we have to do the right thing at the right time. It is time that we have to face this thing head on and review the boundaries as required by law. It is time we have to review the Constitution in total and look at where have we progressed, where are we lagging behind, and what can we do to ensure that we amend so that we can push the agenda for the people of Kenya.
Are we not setting a dangerous precedent, Okango, that yes, the two-thirds gender rule was never implemented and we got away with it, we went to court and they gave an opinion, 13 years later, it is yet to be fully implemented. If we do the same with the boundaries delimitation process, that we fail to implement it within the time frame prescribed by the Constitution, and then we find a way of getting around it, won't we be doing it over and over?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I hope we don't arrive there, but when we arrive there, should we, then the court can actually make an interpretation of the same and advise accordingly. That can be done. So I'm not worried, but what I'm worried about is we must undertake some of these tasks as per the Constitution. The boundary delimitation, if you go through provision of 89, it says that they shall be reviewed in a period not less than 8 years and not more than 12 years. And we are approaching the 12 years by March next year, 2024. So it appears that we are really tight. And therefore, when the Marjan team says they will need 18 months after, I mean, let's be realistic. There are certain things we can do now. And that's why it is in our interest, as Azimio, as Kenya Kwanza, and as the people of Kenya, to ensure that we establish and restructure, reconstitute an IEBC that is believable. It will be dangerous to have an IEBC, you just replace commissioners, and then you go into a boundary delimitation process that is not believable. Remember how that process is emotive. So we have to get things right fast. You know, boundary delimitation is like an election. Let me tell you. It is even more than election. It is very emotive. Okay. You are looking at boundary of existing constituencies, wards. You are looking at population quota. You're looking at the threshold where political interests are high. You cannot go into that process with just replacement of commissioner. You remove A, put B. No, you must restructure, you must reconstitute, and you must have a team that knows what they are doing, qualified, suitable, and capable.
Okay. You're still watching State of the Nation. This is Morning Cafe on TV 47. We'll now take a break. We'll be back with this discussion even as Javas Bigambo, policy and political analyst, joins the panel. Don't go too far. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Indemuli, and you found me right in the middle of posting, tagging our panelists this morning at Javas Bigambo and at F. Okango on X. Introducing Javas Bigambo, political analyst. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
Studio. Just before the break, we were discussing with Frederick Okango what's happening at the Bomas of Kenya and the kind of legal or constitutional landmines that do stand ahead. And one of the biggest worries that I posed to him was a potential defiance of the Constitution on issues to do with the boundaries delimitation. Because the IEBC has already said that without commissioners in place, it cannot undertake the process. And once the commissioners are in place, it will need at least 18 months to do so, meaning that either way, we are not able to meet the March 2024 deadline, which is set out in the Constitution. It is only the second time that we'll be going through this review. So defying that deadline is yet to be tested. Do you foresee a crisis? Do you think that this is something we should be worried about?
Well, thank you, Fred. Worry is the last thing that should be on our minds concerning the issue of boundaries delimitation. If at all, concerns to do with constitutional timelines as set out is anything to go by. Remember that it's supposed to happen within 10 to 12 years after the last, or every 10 to 12 years. Now, as a matter of fact, we know that it's supposed to happen within the 10 to 12 years or before the next election. Or before the next election. Now, as a matter of fact, Fred, we know that it remains a national concern. As Okango said earlier, a critically emotive issue. But remember that the issue of navigating the constitutional provisions is not something that cannot actually be gone beyond. When did we have our first election, general election, under the current constitution? On March 4th, 2013. But initially, there were fears that that election was supposed to happen the previous August. But the Supreme Court gave direction on the necessity. Remember, doctrine of necessity itself is quite vital when you look at conjunctive reading of the Constitution. And secondly, we must therefore strive to have new commissioners in office first, because the Constitution itself does not contemplate a period where constitutional commissions are not fully constituted. It does not contemplate. The mistakes of the past regime where, for example, former President Uhuru Kenyatta had the IEBC without commissioners for so long or fully constituted, or the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights not being fully constituted for a very long time, itself offended the Constitution and the spirit of the rule of law. So what we must strive to have is to ensure that we have got the IEBC fully constituted, and then on a rational basis, establish when and how can we have IEBC properly resourced to conduct the boundaries delimitation. It is important. Further, the issue of what in the US is called redistricting, or here delimitation of boundaries of the units that we have today, is something that is made seriously critical by political interests, driven by the political class. Today, whether you will be moved to or renewed, redistricted, or reconstituted into a particular thing named otherwise, it will not matter to you so much, Fred, but it will matter to the politicians. So what we need to see is to what extent can we have, first of all, the institution bestowed upon the mandate by the Constitution, IEBC, having resources, the technical teams to help it conduct the process, and then have that presented to Parliament. That is what is necessary. But now the issue of the political motives behind all this is what is driving up all these the divisions and the heat concerning the same.
The question is that 13 years later, after we promulgated this new constitution, we've found ways of failing to adhere to some of those deadlines set out on the matter of two-thirds gender rule. Now, this issue of delimitation that we look so obviously to miss this time round. And I pose the same question to him. Are we not setting a bad precedent that, yes, we can always go around some of these provisions or these requirements and get away with it?
Well, I do not look at it so much in terms of matters precedents. I look at it in terms of sustaining and propagating a bad political culture. It is this bad political culture that itself frowns upon the rule of law, constitutionalism, and even just the good sense that progressive democracies should have. Now, all we need is political goodwill. Have we ever had political goodwill? The spear points of disruptive, divisive politics should be blunted by the moral consciousness of the rule of law, good intentions, and just always meaning well by the political class. If you look at it, Fred, Parliament has made critical efforts in the past, in the last Parliament, to try and legislate on the 2/3 gender rule. Now, what is more curious and amusing is that when they take to the microphone in public, they would actually demonstrate their support for the 2/3 gender rule and the bill in Parliament. The moment they're supposed to take a vote on the floor of the House, there is no quorum. So that tells you that they are playing Russian roulette with the issue of the 2/3 gender rule, and just in the next few months, perhaps the issue of the boundaries delimitation. That's why he called it the bad culture of lack of progressive political goodwill for purposes of embracing constitutionalism and the rule of law.
Yes. And this issue of political hygiene it should be one of those issues that are being addressed by NADCO. But how extensive will this issue be, apart from, of course, addressing issues of political rebels and defiance of political party laws, that issues around even political hygiene generally in Kenya, because it would appear, as Java says, it is the politicians who are defying this constitution.
Fred, I'll tell you, the issues of political hygiene is very important, even in implementing the laws that we have. Because without political hygiene, you cannot implement the laws. You cannot respect the Constitution. Now, the issue that has been tabled before NADCO and harmonized by both parties is called political party fidelity and respect to multi-party democracy. If you look at that issue, there are two things that come to mind. Number one, how do we navigate the provisions of Article 103? How do we navigate the provisions of Section 14 of Political Parties Act? Today, this regime, when they came into power, they went and created artificial majority. They are not majority. We are majority. And when they created that, they took the independent members of parliament, they went and took a section of Azimio legislators, and now brag of a majority that can actually achieve the most important threshold in the Constitution called 2/3 in passing certain legislation or in making certain decisions. Then now that is a threat to democracy, because somebody can wake up one day, brings a bad law proposal in parliament and passes it because they brag of majority. Never mind, it's artificial. Now, go back to the question you have asked. In our view as Azimio, we strongly believe that we have an opportunity this time to relook at the aspects of people when you are sponsored through parliament, through a coalition or a party, and you go and manifest the policies of the other side, you sell the agenda, and you still want to be a member of that coalition or that party while the law prohibits you. And it says you shall be deemed to have resigned. They don't resign. They rush to political party tribunal, they get orders, and they sustain these in court for 4 years, and then they go for election. That's what they are saying. Now, that is what we want to cure. Now, we want to cure it from this front. Number one, we must look at that aspect of deeming. What is deeming? When do we now say you must seek fresh mandate, because that is the political, the hygiene that we have to look at. Number two, we have seen instances where the coalition leadership, both in parliament and outside parliament, nominates the leadership in the House, and they say, this is going to be our leader. Case in place, the minority whip, okay? Minority whip that has moved to Kenya Kwanza, deputy minority whip, has moved to Kenya Kwanza, but still want to enjoy the benefit of being in Azimio. This is Sabina Chege. So we are saying you cannot have your cake and eat it. And lastly, we also know the Speaker of any house does not determine majority in the House. This is not hygiene. You know, the majority in the House is determined by the people at the point of election. After election, you can actually know that these are the majority, these are minority. And that job is done, and then the communication is done by the registered political parties. We have not seen that.
Looking at just how passionate Fred Okango is in addressing these issues of political party fidelity, it would appear this is one of the most important things to political parties and the groupings at Bomas. The risk, therefore, is that we end up lumping some very important discussions with some that could probably have waited in one bus. IEBC reconstitution, which should be top of the priority. Top priority, we do not have IEBC. We will not be able to meet a few deadlines. But now we want to discuss all these other issues in one, including some of the 142 memoranda that were presented to the group last week by different organizations. Don't you see a risk with that? The possibility of a boundaries review, an election, a possible referendum. The issue of prioritization, we're simply not getting it right, are we?
Well, we always get it right on the political front by political interests, but we get it wrong when it comes to the germane issues of national progress. And my brother Okango here, quite passionate as he is advancing a very carcinogenic agenda or agitation when he says that, for instance, after the election, when there was the regrouping in Parliament that created the majority on the side of the current regime, is something that, of course, the opposition frowns upon, and legitimately so. But now, do we have a policy and statutory basis for such kind of reorganization? It's only, of course, a bit troublesome that such reorganization happened immediately after the election. But when you look at the very seams and margins of coalition building and the provision in law, there is the liberty of any party to form or join a coalition before election and after election. We must not be tethered so much to that issue, which actually, factually speaking, is water under the bridge. He argues, of course, agreeably so, that we need to have a culture where upon election or after election, when somebody has been sponsored by a party, the issue of fidelity should be embraced in the pendency of that term. Now, as you look at that aspect, it must not be that the very fundamentals of liberty, still guaranteed by the Constitution, freedoms such as association, etc., should be spat on merely by particular political interests. Now, we know that because of the balance that had to be created, such kind of post-election negotiations had to take place. And when you talk about the issue of the priorities, still we get it wrong, especially on the political front. Even the opposition is getting it very wrong. And I say they get it wrong for these reasons. Today, Fred, the issue of party fidelity is an important democratic issue, but it's not the most critical thing that should be on the minds of this country today. Today, yes, the issue of delimitation is more important, but we're getting wrong on the issues of education. Today, as we're sitting here around this table, nearly half of the children or pupils in primary schools will not make it to secondary school. And nearly half of those in secondary schools will not make it beyond that level. What can we do on the education front to make sure that our education does not fail too many, or far too many do not drop out after every stage of progression.
Okay.
These are issues that we should be looking at, and we have not even seen any critical or cogent propositions to the same, for example, in the said NADCO. When you look at the issue of the tax regime, yes, it's been focused on by NADCO, but when you look at the issue of the state of progressive economic fundamentals, that has not been given a critical thought. Do you know that close to 20 million Kenyans today live within the margins of poverty? The next batch of 15 million Kenyans are actually just a breath away from poverty. Nearly just 1 million Kenyans are living fairly comfortably. Now, when you look at the issue of investments, I think close to just about less than 5 million Kenyans have got a bit considerable investments. These are issues that we should be looking at. How do we make sure that we expand rather than shrink the poverty circles in this country? And so I agree with you that when it comes to matters prioritization, the political class has always had their priorities inverted.
And because of that, the question is whether or not these talks will actually be consequential. It appears that Azimio, more than Kenya Kwanza, Azimio feels that the talks will be consequential.
Let me, before I answer that, there's something I don't agree with Javas. If you look at the harmonized issues, political party fidelity is number 5. Priority is number 5. It is at the bottom. However, it affects who is at the top. But he has mentioned something that is important, the issues of education. There's agenda number 1, what is cost of living and Article 43 related matters. That covers the aspect of education we're talking about. And we are looking at a right-based budgeting. Previous regimes have not adhered to right-based budgeting that covers the issues of housing, the issues of, that prioritizes the issues of housing, the issue of education, food, sanitation, water. That is what is making people poor today. And that's why we are saying today the cost of living is high. Tackled with, or coupled with the issues of taxation on fuel and the rest. And we are saying, in our view as Azimio, that issue of cost of living and Article 43, which is socio-economic rights or economic and social rights related matters, is more important than any other thing, because you cannot have a country that people are hungry and going without food, and then you expect them to be productive. They will not be productive. Now, Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya coalition, led by my coalition leader Raila Amolo Odinga, is aware that these talks are important to the people of Kenya, not only him. William Ruto is aware, the leader of Kenya Kwanza, he is aware that these issues are more important to the people of Kenya, not only him. And that's why today, you see in his own coalition or alliance, there's a cross-purpose activity. So for us, we want to tell the people that our coalition leader and the leadership of Azimio are concerned that some of these issues that we've been talking about are affecting the people of Kenya even now. Okay. And that's why we would want to see the product of NADCO, a product that is for the people, a product that is made for the people, a product that will ensure that we address the issues of concern as given by the stakeholders, by Kenya Kwanza, and by Azimio ourselves. So we believe that when we finally get out of bombers, we shall have a progressive activity that will lead us into a long-term solution, short-term solution, and medium-term solution.
Okay. And just before we continue with this conversation, a reminder of our question this morning, and it has to do with mental health issues. Do you believe that mental health issues are becoming a growing concern in Kenya? You can continue interacting with us on social media pages at TV47 News on X, TV47 Kenya on Facebook, even as we continue this conversation. And we now want to move to the politics. Enough of the bipartisan talks at the National Dialogue Committee. Of course, this conversation will continue as we go along. And we'll be introducing panelist Ren Martin, politician and political analyst. Bona Martin, karibu sana. It's good to have you in studio.
Asante sana, thank you.
Yes. You found us, we've really covered a lot, especially on the bipartisan talks happening at Bomas, and we'll not necessarily have to go back to that. I now want us to move on to what has been covered mainly on our headlines across the weekend, and even part of it this Monday. It's what is on the headline on the Daily Nation today. Falling apart. They ask Ruto and Gachagua in a back and forth over shareholding. And this has been the headline, I think, on Sunday and on Saturday. And it talks about the kind of back and forth the president has been having with his deputy. And I know that. I want to look at this tweet here by Frederick Okango, one of my panelists. And he says, we have been listening to Ruto and Gachagua speak at each other, one in Nyanza, the other in Central. Baba and Azimio fraternity shall not respond to them. Wacha wamalizane. Wapenda nao, wamaliza nao. For us, we know our route to the people, Bomas of Kenya, Parliament of Kenya, and then to the people of Kenya. It is coming because it is designed so. One is careful, the other is careless. Probably this is where you come in. Are we reading too much into what these two leaders have been saying, especially on this issue of shareholding?
I think we are a bit too much. We should allow them time to do what they are supposed to do. We elected them to lead us, not for them to have some squabbles a year. It's only a year to their 5 years term. So at least we should relax, let them do what they're supposed to do as Kenyans.
You don't see, because the dailies appear to be talking about possible cracks within the Kenya Kwanza formation. That's the question. Are we reading too much into the possibility of that being the case?
True, we are reading too much, and I don't think there's so much to talk about for now. Let's wait and see.
Javas.
Well, it is interesting that we have made politics our most nutritious meal in this country than anything else. In fact, we invest much more in politics than even we do in agriculture and anything else. About the reading of the state of the political weather or climate, if you like, it is something that is interesting. I would say that the apparent political fissures within the Kenya Kwanza, I think it's only a stretched assumption. Because there is a way that politics must be managed. It must be managed for the interest of the country. It must be managed for the interest of the regime that's in power today. It must be managed for the sake of the future. And the dynamics that necessitated certain coalition arrangements, even within the opposition and within government side today, before election, have fundamentally shifted to the realities that are prevailing today. And that is why, if we were to read the politics and arrangements and scenario, the weather of Kenya Kwanza today, using the same instruments that we did in the run-up to the election, then we'll be missing the boat by the river. Today, the political tectonics within the opposition has shifted. The entire teams that came together to go into the election is no longer holding. In government today, the same way nearly every person who was in Kenya Kwanza, driven by passion, not all of them are sustained by the same passion after election today. That's what I'm talking about, the fundamentals or the realities of post-election management. Today, President William Ruto is driven by the agencies of governance. Before election, he was driven by the urgency of pursuit of political power and office. The dynamics are very different. Okay. And I think also we must not stretch too much about the statements that have been said by the president, because the president said, and I quote in part, that it is primitive for any person to imagine that those or particular areas will not benefit from development merely on the basis of how they voted in the last election. And it's actually true, because he is the president of the Republic of Kenya, symbol of national unity, and all regions appreciate him as president. Whether they acknowledge it in spirit or in fact, it does not matter. Okay. For Honorable Rigathi Gachagua, the deputy president, he indicated, they say in part, that there is an aspect of shareholding, and he has held on to that statement to date. He would rather become unpopular by that statement than become popular without that statement about shareholding. Okay. And he's stuck to that. But that is politics. When it comes to resource allocation and governance, what realities are we seeing? resources are going to all the 47 counties, all regions. The president, in fact, impressively, has visited nearly every county and every part of this country with a serious passion and commitment than any other president in a period such as his. Okay. And so I'm saying the president is so much committed to the development and focus and the inclusivity of all regions.
Okay. Yeah. And when you're talking, Fred Okango was chuckling. He says, wacha wamalizane, wapenda nao wamaliza nao.
You know, Fred, we have been here, and I'll tell you from the Azimio position. When the election ended, and Honorable William Ruto and Rigathi took office, Rigathi started by saying that this is a company. Kenya is not a company, and we all know Kenya is a republic. And he said that those with majority shares will get the majority of the jobs, will get majority of the allocation, will get majority of the services. That is wrong. And that's why, after realizing that for sure Kenya is a republic, and for sure William Ruto must serve the interests of all Kenyans, as per the requirement of Article 6, that says the state organs shall ensure adequate, reasonable access to services in all parts of the republic, for as far as that service is concerned and to the extent that is possible. Then now they are saying, we are not going to allow primitive and backward talks. Who was he responding to? Honorable Ruto was responding to Rigathi, and he told him, let's accept it. And that's why Rigathi is now coming back and saying he will protect the interest of the shareholders in Rift Valley and in Central. Never mind, this is somebody who is supposed to be a deputy president of the Republic of Kenya, not Kenya Kwanza, not Central, not Rift Valley. Number two, we know this issue of shareholding, and my coalition leader, Raila Amolo Odinga, has talked about it for quite some time. The principle of the constitution in Kenya is that when you are appointing people into public office, you must respect the principle of regional and ethnic diversity of the people of Kenya. That is the law. Rigathi is telling Ruto, when you are appointing, please don't respect that. What you should do, consider shareholders in Central Kenya and Rift Valley first, then go to Kenyans as others. Okay. Lastly, Javan, so that you talk. You know, he said that in the NADCO talks, there'll be no audit, and we should not audit the election. Remember, William Ruto has not responded to that issue. And if you look at the stakeholders' engagement, majority of the people who appeared before NADCO said, for sure, we need audit, not to get Ruto out of office, but to ensure that Kenyans know the truth. Remember, Fred, we have access to information, Article 35, that every Kenyan has a right to access that information that is held by the state. Number two, we have the general principles of electoral system that requires that in administering an election, it must be done in a manner that is accountable, verifiable, transparent, and all that. We must only get that through an audit. Now, when the Kenya Kwanza appeared before the NADCO, they actually had no problem with audit. Rigiji had a problem. So it is true that we are seeing a crack. But that crack, I can also tell you, as somebody who is from Azimio, is a crack that we are not really interested in. And that's why my tweet said, when they are done fighting, and fighting about whatever, we the people of Kenya, we Azimio, we shall take the surest route to the people. That route from Bomas, we go to Parliament, and then we arrive at the people. Okay. We shall address those issues of concern.
Well, you see, my brother Okango's pollens must be beneficial, must have benefit of the cross-pollination of facts and the reality that is of today. Government, and Okango knows as much as I do, that governments are not run by whimsical banter, but by policy and the constitution and statutes of the land. Today, even if, for example, he says that the deputy president, it's attributed to him that he said there's the issue of shareholding. If you were to conduct an audit of appointments today, whether at board level, etc., or look at commissions, would we arrive at a conclusion that the tribes of Kenya are not included in all those appointments? You see, I'd like us to look at things in a factual way. Secondly, is it the presumption of my brother Okango that it is official government policy that there is seclusion and discrimination on the basis of ethnic extraction? That is not material. In fact, that itself would offend the provision of Article 27, sub-Article 4 of the Constitution. His Excellency the President was sworn into office to defend and protect the Constitution.
You say when the Deputy President makes such remarks, it is inconsequential?
When the Deputy President makes certain remarks on his political tracks, that is not official government policy.
Who is the Deputy President?
Now listen, let's face it. What is the constitutional provision of the mandate of the Deputy President?
The principal
He is
assistant
the principal
to the
assistant
President
or advisor to the President. When advice is rendered, it is up to the intended recipient of such advice to appreciate such advice or not. When we look at fact and materiality of governance under President William Ruto, are we seeing that he is or he has embraced the advice of seclusion of certain quarters of Kenyans? That is not material, that's not a fact. That's what I'm saying. It must not be construed from the position of Okango, erroneously so, that it is government policy to engage in seclusion on the basis of ethnic extraction or how people voted in the last election.
For the President to find it necessary to talk about those remarks without even referring to his deputy definitely shows a divergence of opinion, that while you think this way, there are other schools of thought. That in itself could be seen as an issue. We know, and from our history, that divergence of opinion between the President and his deputy can actually be quite consequential to a government.
That's true.
Are we saying that this time round we should just ignore it because this is William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua?
Okay, we shouldn't ignore it, but we should also remember we have had the Deputy President saying he'll handle the political part of Kenya Kwanza, and the President will do the presidency as is enshrined by the law. Let's not forget there's a political formation in our country. I can take you back to during the campaigns. Our brothers from the Azimio had already CS positions given or handed out to their members. We should not lie to ourselves that there's no that shareholding thing in our politics. We all know those people who contribute, the majority have to.
So you support the Deputy President's...
somehow.
Yes, it is a shareholding.
The shareholding.
Yes.
Yes.
And so we should live with that fact.
We should.
Oh, no.
We should try to live.
No.
Okay.
Fred, I mean, we can't say that. But maybe understand, you know, before him there's a yellow paper and it's UDA. And I want to believe that he manifests the ideology. But Fred, listen, look at the choice of venue, the location, where Honorable Ruto decides to respond to Rigiji. Luo Nyanza. This is a community, because I come from that community, that has been excluded for ages. They have been excluded in terms of access to services, development, appointment, for a very long time in successive governments. Apart from when the Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga was in office as a Prime Minister. And even at that time, he was not fully in. But William Ruto chose Nyanza Tour to go and respond to his deputy. Why? Because he is trying to lure or to win that section. And let me just remind you, he said that now that, because in his assumption, he has a competitor in Kenya, in Azimio. Now that probably our leader might not be running, he will be competing against one of the principals. And he asked the people, do you think that person can defeat me? And people, it was a bit lukewarm. But what I'm saying is that why is William Ruto not responding to Rigiji in central Kenya the same way? Why is William Ruto not responding to Rigiji in Rift Valley like that? Because this is now the race for the next contest, 2027. What he's doing is trying to win regions that he believes did not vote for him. And he has said it himself. And you saw the other day, he's already coming out in his party colors, restructuring his party. They are going for election this December. What we want to see as Azimio, we want to see a Kenya that is united in terms of appointment, service delivery, development, and even in talk, because we all pay taxes in this country. We cannot allow Rigiji to get away with the shareholding talk and says this is a company. Kenya is a republic. William Ruto has realized that Kenya is actually a republic, and he knows it. But his deputy, as he said, it is true, he is playing politics. That politics of division and exclusion must end. Our leader, Raila Amolo Odinga, today understands that even though there are certain areas in this country that did not vote for him, those areas should equally enjoy the benefit of development from the government of the day. And therefore, he had no problem with William Ruto going to Nyanza. In fact, in his last interview before William Ruto went to Nyanza, he said that he's welcome for as long as he does what is right to the people, and that is development. Okay. We maintain as Azimio that the talk on shareholding must end. That is not what we want to see. We want to see inclusivity. We want to see development accessed by everyone. We want to see a country that is united. That is what Raila Odinga is fighting.
And on this conversation of shareholding, I'm curious to find out how much of it affected or did we see in the recent cabinet reshuffle? Because it's not just about jobs, it is also the caliber of jobs. And when you talk about shareholding, it could be regional to some extent. There are those positions within cabinet that had already been negotiated pre-election for certain regions. That has since changed in the last 1 week.
When you look at the formation or the constitution of a cabinet or the executive, it is to render services to the people of Kenya. While politically some have considered certain cabinet portfolios as more plum than others, it must be very true to us that there is no inferior cabinet position. First, you are at the apex of decision-making in terms of policy in government. Of course, so much politics was read in the issue of the reshuffling. We know very well that it is the president's prerogative to rearrange the cabinet the way he so wishes. But of course, it's also important for us to appreciate the truth that when it comes to considering how certain persons fill certain positions, it is true from the recent reshuffle that the question of performance, effectiveness remain quite important, not just to the president, but even to the people of Kenya with regard to how particular persons are executing their duties. In fact, if my opinion was sought, I would have indicated that the reshuffle should have been actually very surgical and extensive, so much so that certain even persons should have been dropped from cabinet. Because what Kenyans want is effective service delivery. I pray for a time when we shall throw our arms around constructive, progressive, high-level politics that is beyond the narrow basis of what my brother Okango calls the issue of the president wearing certain colors. Like the opposition now has come to a point where it must dictate even the kind of colors that the president must wear. I mean, really, we must not draw ourselves to such fringes of thought. Now, the other thing is that we are living in very consequential times. Nearly a very decisive era. A time when Vision 2030 is nearly coming to a close. A time when the Africa Vision 2063 is very critical. A time when, for example, Kenya's international significance is quite considerable. Today we are talking about the issue of Haiti. We are talking about the issue of NYS and the youth bulge in the country. What can be done to scale up employment opportunities, to invest much more in the youth, and to see how to scale up investment in social protection programs for the old. These are critical issues that actually should be so germane at a time such as this than discussing the color of clothes that the president is wearing.
Okay. Back to the issue of the cabinet reshuffle, because it must have, to some extent contributed to this renewed talk about shareholding. It came just before the president went to Nyanza. They say in politics, things don't just happen. There must be a connection between one and the other. How much of this do you think, especially, and if I may use an example, the elevation of the Prime Cabinet CS to include that docket for foreign and diaspora affairs?
Yes. In football, the best game we usually follow. We have the first 11 and we have the bench. I'll agree with my brother there. Actually, we would have loved to see some changes, some surgical changes in the cabinet secretaries. You are chosen, you are given that opportunity by the president to work for the people. And any time or any given time you start to play around with your mandate, it doesn't go well with the people. It's us, the people, who ensured you are there. And we need services from our CS. We need seriousness from our CS. The president has his own people, he has his own advisors, and see how things work, how things move. So he's in the best position to see whom he's supposed to change or move from point A to point B. Yes. Okay,
Okango, do you think that the deputy president has been left a bit uncomfortable with that recent reshuffle? The dynamics are many, but in any way, do you think he's been left uncomfortable?
Absolutely. Let me start from what he said recently, I think yesterday and the other day. He said that he would want to increase the shareholding of Central Kenya from the current 47% to 60% in the next election. That means you want to add 13%. How and when, we don't know. That tells you he's actually uncomfortable with what happened. But let me go back, and this is where we all agree, the three of us. The cabinet reshuffle was inconsequential in our view as Azimio. Why? Because we know the principles of appointment in public office, that the people you put into office must be suitable, they must be capable, they must have personal integrity, and that's the law. Now, if you look at some of those people, right from the first day they were appointed, they are unsuitable, they are incompetent, some of them, and they lack personal integrity. It would have been a very good opportunity for Honorable Ruto to use a reshuffle that was going to weed out those that are seen to be incapable, unsuitable, and incompetent, and also those who lack personal integrity. Number two, it would have been a perfect opportunity for Ruto to actually perfect the aspect of inclusivity so that we don't go again into this shareholding that Rigiji is telling us. You include regions that are considered excluded. And this is where I disagree with Javan, because if you look at that cabinet, let's start from the PSS. How many out of the 50 plus are from the two communities? Majority, 26 of them, half from two regions. That is not the principle of the constitution, and he's a lawyer, he knows that. Number two, he should have used that opportunity to win the regions that did not vote for him by appointment. This is politics. He should have played that politics. And that's why you can see him now running to other regions that did not vote for him to try and appease them using development. And I'll tell you, I'm not a prophet of doom, but I can tell you, we are likely to see another, probably in another 8 months or so, coming. And that now will be the final nail on the Kenya Kwanza coffin. Because we see one careful person and one careless person, as I said. A careful person is worried that in the next election, he must be re-elected. A careless person is chest stamping that is a kingpin, and they want to make a mountain out of this. It is not going to be easy. He must learn from the previous regime what happened to his boss.
Okay. For how long can this narrative about shareholding continue? Because we're looking at the elections, and already people are talking about elections. The president talked about 2027. He said, the next election I will be vying against this person. The deputy president is already talking about the kind of shareholding and support, the extent of support that his side or his community should give the president. But for how long can this narrative of shareholding last? We're only 1 year into this new administration.
Fred, when you're juggling a hot potato, your choices are always very limited. Either you throw the potato away or keep on juggling it until it cools. Now, the statement about shareholding is attributed to the Deputy President. That statement will remain there as long as he remains a politician. So it's up to him then to choose to vacate his position on that statement or stick with it and stick with the consequences that come with it. Whether it will cool off like the hot potato or not, that we leave to time. Mm-hmm. But what we know is that it kind of leaves a bad taste in the mouth, because all of us pay taxes. All of us are beholden to this motherland of ours. All of us look up in attention and listen with critical attention to the words of the national anthem when they are sung. That anthem is not only an issue of our patriotism and nationalism, it's also a prayer about us as a people. And so this country belongs to all of us. And that's why it is quite agreeable on my part, and I associate with the statements of the president, that whether you voted in a particular way in the last election or not, this country belongs to all of us, and we must move forward together.
This narrative, if it gets close to the next election, it has the potential of having political consequences. It could be a burden even for the president if it is sustained to that point.
True. There's a political narrative that says usipojipanga utapangwa in politics. We should move away from this usipojipanga utapangwa in politics and focus. Immediately you are elected in office, you're supposed to work for the people. But most of our politicians nowadays, they start focusing 5 years beyond them. And this is the problem that we are all facing. And this will bring squabbles in between. If we focus as leaders and know our mandate and what we are supposed to do, then we won't be having these sideshows of, oh, this and this. So the best for us is let us focus on what we are supposed to do and avoid politics. If we avoid politics for some time, then things will align themselves.
Okay. How possible it is to avoid politics. But gentlemen, because of time, and time has really moved fast, I'll ask you to make your final comments. Let's start with you, Javas.
Well, first, I think it is clear that our politics are still volatile, and we are not moving or drifting away from the issues of the last election. The hiccups of the 2022 general election are still with us, and the consequence will be there, I think, up to perhaps the next election. But what is important for us, I think, is that if we can take time to consider things that are going to make Kenya even more important regionally and even globally, and that consequence itself to be mirrored in our politics, I think we'll do much better for ourselves. Secondly, I think it's time that and look at even what Naduko is discussing. Some of the things are important, but they have also left out very other critical issues. We as a people, let us come together, refuse the temptation of being pushed or boxed into particular quotas by politicians, and remember that while politics is important in the affairs of this country, as it is in the affairs of any democracy, that let us also try to be ahead or be with the politicians, because what has always led us into this hole, politicians in this country are a century ahead of the ordinary people, and they dictate the moves on the chessboard.
Okay, thank you so much, Javas. Bwana Okango.
We, as Azimio, we know where we are coming from, but for sure we also know where we are going. Our concern now is the people of Kenya, and that's why we left the streets and came to the boardroom. We want to believe that the talks will bear something, and that something must be sustainable and must be a long-lasting solution. We don't want to know what is happening with the current regime. We ask them to fix their issues and come to the table without a distraction, because all these are distractions. We know what is happening with the telcos, we know what's happening with the stock exchange, we know what's happening with the budget, the debt. Let them fix that, so that as we move forward as a nation. And lastly, we also know that our coalition leader, Raila Odinga, has worked so hard to ensure that the people of Kenya enjoy some of these things that we're doing today. We want to continue asking him, even as he keeps quiet now, let him ensure that he understands the views of the majority and listens to them and give a solution as he has always given. Otherwise, those talks from the neighbors cannot stop us from enjoying our peace.
Okay, thank you so much. Finally, anything to add?
Yes. My humble appeal to the President and all leaders in our republic, things are not good out here. Things are very tough, and it's their obligation to ensure that the mamambogas, those hustlers around, everyone enjoys the fruits of our nation. We need to see what we can do with our economy. We need to streamline issues. We need to see the price of fuel coming down, the prices of electricity, etc. As we move forward, let us all focus in building our nation and avoid sideshows, and that will lead us somewhere.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ren Martin, politician and political analyst, Javas Bigambo, policy and political analyst, as well as Frederick Okango, political affairs secretary, KANU. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your very well-considered opinions on these issues around state of the nation. And now, before we wrap up this session, I'll have to go through this editorial comment. As Kenya prepares to celebrate Utamaduni Day tomorrow, it is crucial to reflect upon the significance of fostering positive ethnicity in today's society. This celebration serves as a reminder of our rich and diverse cultural heritage, which collectively defines us as uniquely Kenyan. In recent weeks and months, we have witnessed the dark side of ethnicity, unfortunate incidents of violence, and even loss of life due to tribal divisions in places like Sondu and Lamu. We have for long also been taught to run back to our tribal caves of fear whenever we see a group of young men from one community chant their tribal songs. Does it mean that nothing positive can come out of such congregation? Does ethnicity always have to be seen through the eyes of them versus us? Now, the fear of mistrust that often accompany ethnic divisions continue to threaten our unity and stability. We must actively seek ways towards embracing positive ethnicity, where we see our diversity more as a source of strength rather than division. We have coexisted for decades, and many Kenyans have intermarried, resulting in a generation of children who do not necessarily identify with a single tribe. Embracing positive ethnicity involves recognizing the value of each culture, language, and tradition within Kenya. It means celebrating the contributions of different ethnic groups to our national identity while promoting unity and inclusivity. It also entails dismantling stereotypes and prejudices that perpetuate negative perception of